What's going on, guys? Welcome to NFL Week 5 recap. You like that? This is RJ from Game News USA, back today to go over all these scores and talk about what happened this week in the NFL. So thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Leave your thoughts in the comments below about what you thought of NFL Week 5. So let's jump into it. First, I want to say the bye teams for this week were the Lions, the Titans, the Eagles, the Chargers. I would say for the Lions, hey, they were playing great. They're 3-1. They got a good bye. The Titans got the first win of the season last week, so they're feeling pretty good going into the bye as well, after being completely a doormat before that. The Eagles needed a bye because they just had a really poor performance against the Bucks, and the Chargers needed a bye because they're limping badly. They have so many injuries. The bye couldn't have come at a better time for them. So, with that being said, let's jump right to Thursday night, where we have our title of this video here. The Falcons and the Bucks had a good old-fashioned offensive shootout, back and forth. What a tremendous game. Obviously a candidate for Game of the Year. I want you guys to keep this in mind. Kirk Cousins threw for 509 yards. Has the Falcons won 36-30 in overtime. He led a game-winning, or game-tying drive, spiked the ball with 1 second left in order to get a kickoff to send this game to OT. This game was phenomenal. It was back and forth. The offenses were up and down the field. And Kirk Cousins becomes the 22nd quarterback in NFL history to throw for over 500 yards in a single game. He was only 45 yards away from finally being somebody who could pass Norm Van Brocklin's record from like 1951. I have no idea how it still stands to this day. But Baker Mayfield had an excellent game. It just wasn't quite enough. And honestly, whoever won the coin toss at overtime was going to win this game, and that's exactly what happened. So Falcons get the huge win versus the Bucks. A much-needed win. Earlier in the year, they started off a little sluggy, a little slow, and now they're right in the thick of things in the NFC South, which is where I thought they would be. All right. Next up, we have the London game Sunday morning. The Minnesota Vikings beat the New York Jets 23-17. And this game shouldn't have got as close as it did. The Jets started to make a late push in the game, but it didn't quite work out for them. Aaron Rodgers had a bunch of turnovers. And guess what? Robert Saleh has been fired by the New York Jets. Nah, 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 nah. Hey, hey, hey. Goodbye. I don't like the Jets. Everybody knows that. I'm a Patriots fan. So, anytime they lose, I'm happy. Never been a big fan of Aaron Rodgers. I do agree he's one of the top 10, maybe top 5 quarterbacks of all time. But I've never liked how the man handles himself. He skipped mandatory minicamp. He's getting what he deserves. He's getting older. The team around him isn't good enough. They got issues. Meanwhile, the Vikings, still undefeated. They'll be heading into a bye next week. They didn't look quite as sharp this game. Didn't matter. They came up with the dub. That's what matters right now. The Vikings, even though they're undefeated, they're also in a division that is extremely competitive, with the Bears sitting there at 3-2, the Packers sitting there at 3-2, and the Lions sitting there at 3-1. They have to stay ahead of the game. All 4 teams from the NFC North might make the playoffs at the end of the year. That's something to watch. I'm surprised the Jets fired Robert Saleh when they did. They could have done it before the season, chose not to. Now doing it mid-season when they have a chance to actually be first place in the AFC East next week was a little surprising. But this was eventually going to happen. Everybody knew the writing was on the wall. All right, next up, the Bears demolished the Panthers now that we're in the early window of Sunday games after the London games. Bears won 36-10. Caleb Williams had over 300 yards passing. He's really coming into his own. The Bears are starting to look like the team that I thought they would. There's a lot of teams out there that had slow starts, so I was panicking, should I jump ship? And then they're starting to right the ship. It's a long season, folks. It's a long season. The Panthers are still not any good. The Bears are an ascending team. Trust me, they will be in the playoffs. come hell or high water, even if all 4 NFC North teams are also in there. Next up, we have another game that, honest to God, was probably the game of the week, but most of the country didn't see because CBS totally screwed up what they scheduled for the late window, even though that game wasn't bad too. They had that game on in the early window, and the Ravens won 41-38. I think Zach Taylor's officially on the hot seat. The Bengals defense can't stop a wet paper bag. And when they had a chance to win the game in overtime, they ran the ball 3 times and then botched the field goal. And the Ravens ended up winning. So Bengals are sitting at 1-4. They're the best 1-4 team I've ever seen in my lifetime. Joe Burrow playing out of his mind doesn't even matter. He's still losing. The Ravens look absolutely scary and nightmarish. Again, they're like one of these teams that started 0-2, kind of sluggish. Now you do not want to play them. You do not want to play them right now. They are 3-2. Next up, my Patriots lost the Dolphins 15-10. Sad day. I really thought this is a game we could win, even though we're not that good this year. But Miami has just been atrocious without Tua. They were able to squeak out a win anyway. AFC East is not as good as people thought it would be, so I guess everybody's still kind of in the division. Then next up, we got Washington dispatching in Cleveland 34-13. Speaking of teams you don't want to play right now, and speaking of rookies that are destroying everybody, Jaden Daniels for Washington is downright scaring everybody. This guy is phenomenal. He's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Washington absolutely got the right guy when they picked him. And Cleveland's left wondering, what are they going to do to get out of this Deshaun Watson contract? Like, this is just a disaster for them. Meanwhile, Washington's one of the darling Cinderella teams in the NFL, 4-1 to start the season. I mean, if I was able to pick right now who's winning the NFC East, they would be my pick. They weren't my pick at the beginning of the year, so I can't claim it. But they're looking like the best team in that division, one of the best teams in the NFC. Especially if you consider this, if they're had this successful this early, Jalen Daniels is only going to get better. Yeah, they'll get more tape on him, but he's a phenomenal talent, and he has a high percentage of completion, which is what surprises me the most about his rookie run. Next up, Jags were able to beat the Colts 37-34 in a shootout, another offensive shootout, another great game. Nobody paid attention to this one as much, but it was very important for Jags fans to finally get a victory. So now every team in the NFL has won at least one game. So that's something, I suppose. The Colts, Joe Flacco looks like a more competent quarterback than Anthony Richardson, but the defense let him down in this game. Jacksonville gets the win. Then next up, we have the game that I was watching in the early window. Bills, Texans. Texans were able to win 23-20. They did everything imaginable to cough this game back up to the Bills, and the Bills completely fumbled it away with horrible clock management at the end of the game. And the Texans were able to squeak out the win. So, hey, Texans are 4-1. The Bills are 3-2. I expect both these teams to win their divisions. They might meet up in the playoffs again. Who knows what will happen. If it's in Buffalo, I mean, that might be a trouble for Houston, but right now Houston has the edge. C.J. Stroud threw for over 300 yards. He's phenomenal. We come to expect greatness from him, so when he's not perfect, we start to be like, oh, what happened here? Josh Allen had a really horrible passing game when it came to his completion percentage. 9 for 30 is unacceptable in today's NFL. It's a miracle they were even in the game. Next up, we got Broncos defeating the Raiders 34-18. I know the Raiders are bad. I know they're 2-3. They overachieved even doing that. But the story here is about the Broncos. The Broncos were 0-2 to start the season. I picked them to be a dark horse wild card team. I was kind of laughed at and ridiculed for it, but you see it coming together now. Bo Nix is getting better week to week. Sean Payton's offense is getting better week to week. And the Broncos have a really good defense. They just have a really good defense. And I think the Broncos are going to continue to surprise some people going forward. I think they're really good. So, and Bo Nix and Sean Payton sort of yelled at each other on the sideline. It was kind of a funny moment. And Sean Payton in the press conference later said he's got to get some of that Ferris Bueller out of this player. So that was kind of a hilarious, heartwarming moment on the sideline, if that's what you want to call it. But, yeah, I believe in the Broncos to, hang around that 500 mark at least. The next up, and by the way, we are now in the later window. But next up, we have Cardinals 49ers. This game infuriated me. Like, if I had to pick a second favorite team in the NFL, it's the Niners. I enjoy them. I enjoy watching them. But the last 2 weeks, they've blown leads of 13-plus points. They lost to the Cardinals 24-23 in a game they shouldn't have lost. I don't understand how this keeps happening. It boggles my mind. I keep choosing the Niners to win. They keep finding new ways to let me down. So maybe that'll change this Thursday night when they play the Seahawks. But Cardinals get the win. Cardinals are a team I said, hey, look at them. They're not a joke. They're pretty good too. And they are. But they shouldn't have been able to come back in that game. Then we had Packers-Rams. That's the game CBS chose for the late window instead of putting Bengals-Ravens there. I think it was a mistake. But it turned out to be a good game. The Packers were able to win 24-19. The Rams sort of have a lost season going on. They got a lot of injuries. They're 1-4 now, which means they're tied for one of the worst records in the NFL. So Matthew Stafford can still sling it, but it's not really helping a whole lot when all your skill players are hurt and your offensive line sucks. And so Packers win, and, they're a team that wins, a decent amount of their games. They're going to be around towards the end of the season. Next up, Giants upsetting the Seahawks. This is one of the more surprising upsets of the day. It's my understanding the Seahawks have all their defensive linemen hurt, which is one of the reasons why the Giants were able to win. Daniel Jones actually sneakily playing a lot better than people expected of him. The Giants are 2-3. They'll actually have the better record when they play the Bengals on Sunday Night Football. They're not completely dead. They have a pulse. The Seahawks, you start to see them. They could be spiraling. They won 3 games in a row. Now they've lost 2. There's some teams that have won their early games, and now they've lost a few, just like there's teams that lost a few. Now they're winning some. Everything comes back to the law of averages for the most part eventually in the league of parity, so-called parity. It's not quite with one team, which I'll get to later. There's something going on in the water in Kansas City. Then next up, Sunday Night Football. This was a pretty entertaining game. There was a weather delay that actually kicked this game to be like almost 2 hours later. I stayed up and watched it. Dallas was able to pull off the win on the road versus the Steelers. I always pick against the Steelers, it seems like. I feel like they shouldn't be as good as they are or get as many wins as they do, and this happens to me year after year. But luckily I was right here thinking the Cowboys would win. They were able to win despite the injuries on defense. It was a close game. It came down to the very end, honestly. And Cowboys ought to feel good about this win, especially because of what they've gone through this season. It's not been a very happy 3-2 for the Cowboys, but I guess they're going to have to take it. And that leads us to Monday Night Football, where we had the New Orleans Saints versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And like I talked about earlier, some teams started off red hot and they've completely cooled off. The Saints are definitely one of them. They look like the team that I thought was the third place team in the NFC South when the season started. Taysom Hill's hurt. Derek Carr might be hurt now after taking a brutal shot, legal shot, but a hard shot. And, the Chiefs played really aggressive on defense. They were willing to possibly get burnt deep, and they did a few times. But for the most part, their aggressiveness led to Kansas City owning the time of possession. They had a game plan going in. They didn't really have many receivers going into this game, and instead of resorting back to Sky Moore and other players that they haven't trusted in the past, they would line up quite often in 2 tight end or 3 tight end sets and run a completely different offense, and they would make it work. I have to give it up to the Chiefs. I have to give them a lot of credit. Back-to-back defending champions. Patrick Mahomes not playing his best. He really hasn't played great in the regular season, for like 22 games now. Like all of last year, he's something like middle of the pack quarterback in the regular season. And then this year, it's no better, if not worse. Doesn't matter. The Chiefs keep winning anyway. That's what good teams do. That's what good coach teams do. And they take care of business at home on Monday Night Football, heading into the bye. Everybody should believe until the Chiefs do get beat. Even though you could think and see teams that look better, or you think they're better than the Chiefs, we got to see if somebody can beat these guys. And until that happens, it's hard to pick against them, isn't it? So credit to them for a top-notch organization. I tip my cap. I'd like to see other teams get in the mix, but what I want and what we get are two different things in life. You know what I mean? So anyway, guys, that is my NFL recap for Week 5. Did you like that? I hope you did. Don't forget to like the video. Thank you all for watching. Peace. Have a good one. I'm out.